Well, hello and welcome or welcome back to Read Becca for another weekly chatty catch-up on everything that I've read, everything I'm currently reading, and everything I'm looking forward to reading for roughly the current week, as well as some general chit-chat. And today my co-host is Dusty. I don't know if you can see his little tongue is sticking out. It's very cute, as usual. So, onward to the reading. It was a very good reading week, but I noticed an unintentional trend. Oh, we lost our co-host. An unintentional trend. With June, I was wanting to go a little lighter and read by whim a little bit, and I somehow accidentally wound up reading 3 separate lockdown projects from different authors. Last week I had Big Panda Tiny Dragon, which is kind of a very short, light art book-ish, and this week I also had 2 novellas that were also kind of short and light that were lockdown projects. So very funny coincidence. So I was definitely feeling that mindset of wanting to switch off my brain a bit. So let's talk about those first, I guess. Let's start with the Sitcom Star by Jackie Lau. This is a novella-length contemporary romance set in, I think, Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And most of Lau's romance is contemporary. Most of it is set in Canada, or at least partly in Canada. And most of it has a lot to do with family, culture, and food. And this is no exception to that. So we have we have 2 people and we alternate their perspectives. So one is a woman who is very type A, workaholic, who works on a TV show called Choose Restaurant, very connected to or likened to Kim's Convenience. And she has been told she needs to learn to relax a little bit more and stop being such a workaholic, but she doesn't really know how to do that. She has a chance encounter with a guy from her childhood who had a lifelong crush on her. She doesn't know that he had a lifelong crush on her, but he is the very laid back, never really seemed motivated, but was always successful and choosy about what he put his time and energy into, I would say, and much more able to go with the flow. So this is very much a gender swap on one of Lau's books that I had read previously, Mr. Hotshot CEO, where we had a workaholic CEO who needed help with learning to relax. That's exactly the story that plays out here in a more short form, where basically she just kind of recruits him in this story to teach her how to relax, to enjoy life, and to follow her whims, which is exactly the mood I was in. So I loved this. It was really fun, and I heard about it from Shannon, from That's So Po, or formerly of That's So Po, sadly, who told me it was a lot of those same vibes, and it was a fun time. Lots of delicious sounding food, lots of connection with family, and a very sweet, low drama romance, I would say. So really enjoyed this one, as I have with all of Jackie Lau's romances. So then I went to Love and Saffron by Kim Fay, and I adored this book. It was so good. It was so much more than I expected, and it's really short. So basically the only critique I have of it is that I really, really wanted it to be longer. I wanted more. I kept listening right to the last minute, hoping there would be more, because I was listening to this on audio. And the audio was fantastic because it has multiple narrators throughout for each of the individuals that are involved. But this is an epistolary novel as well, so it's going back and forth between 2 women in the 1960s. One, Imogen, is in her 60s, so she is an older woman who's been married for decades, and the other is Joan, who is a younger woman. I want to say she was in her older 20s, maybe. There's a definite generation gap there. So they're from different generations, different ages, they have different life experiences, but they connect over food. So this is them writing letters back and forth, delighting in the joy of discovery when it comes to food and cultures that they're uncovering. And they really find this amazing sense of connection through food, not just to each other, but it opens up a whole world to them that they didn't know about. And obviously, this being the 60s, it was much harder to source rare ingredients. And so that's kind of where the saffron in the title comes from. So they're making these connections over trying to find new foods and discovering other cultural traditions in cooking that they didn't know about. There was so much that's just heartwarming and cozy about this book. And I connected with this book so much. It was so engaging. I loved the characters so much. They felt whole and like real people. And this also had some harder moments. This didn't shy away from mentioning what was going on in the world that was very difficult, major happenings politically over these several years that these letters span, because there was a lot going on in the 1960s. And it feels very natural to hear them incorporating that throughout this story. It doesn't feel like shoehorned in to signpost the major happenings of the world. It feels like these women really reacting to what's going on in their life and world and recounting that through these letters. And so it just swept me up so completely. But it's not without difficult times. We definitely see both of them go through struggles and making difficult decisions and turning to one another during those difficult times in letters, or sometimes not turning to one another and having to process on one side or the other over dealing with that. This is just such a heartfelt and beautiful, beautiful story. I'm so glad I was turned on to it. So I had kind of seen the cover and thought it was going to be a much more fluffy, insubstantial book than it is, and this has definite substance, but I grabbed it because of Joel and Greg from Supposedly Fun. They had kind of raved about it last year, and so it was on my radar to get to because of them, and I am so happy I did. I'm also really happy I got to this because I wanted to participate in Shelley's historical readathon this month that's going on, so I will link that down below. And I was feeling like anything that popped into my mind for that was so heavy that I didn't think I was going to participate at all. And so when I saw this, I was like, oh yes, I can try this out. This is set in the 1960s, obviously, entirely. And so this fits perfectly if you're looking for something that's a little lighter, a little more joyful, and very heartwarming for the historical readathon. I heartily recommend it. On top of that, Kim Fay is a food writer, so she has a lot of nonfiction about food. So I will definitely be pursuing her back catalog in that area because I really enjoyed the writing about food. It was just delicious sounding and very rich text. So from a prose standpoint, she really attracted me to her writing. So then let's turn to my final book, which I actually did read in print, and that is So Many Beginnings by Bethany Morrow. And this is, I don't know if you'll be able to see this, this is a Little Women remix. That is a line of books from the publisher Fievel and Friends. They are doing these YA retellings of classics, basically. And so this is the retelling of Little Women. And I wanted to pick this up because I just recently had gone through reading a biography of Louisa May Alcott, the author of Little Women, and also watched Little Women, the newer Greta Gerwig version, and really enjoyed both of those. And this had been on my radar to get to, and I've been trying to have some more immediacy in following those connections between books. So I was like, if I'm going to get to this, I should do it this time when I have just finished all those other things related to it. So I'm glad I got to this. This is very much the story of Little Women, which I'm not going to recount to you very much other than the fact that it is a mundane story of four girls, or really these four girls in a individual family, the March family, and the life experiences that they're going through. So it's a very mundane story. This is that. This has all of the bullet points that you would expect if you know the Little Women story. And it does kind of seem to expect you to already know these characters. There's not a huge amount of introduction to the characters. But what I think this does really well is the element that it's supposed to be doing, which is taking the same plot beats, the same general place and time, and reshaping the idea of that story in a different lived experience. So obviously these are girls of color. They have come from an experience of enslavement, but are now living in a freed colony, Roanoke Island. And that completely changes aspects of how the general story would have to play out. Even just simple things. Simple things like Amy traveling is a really big element of her having this very different life experience from her sisters in the original story. And here, at the start of that, at the onset of discussing if they can even let her go travel, is a real struggle for the family because there is this real looming threat. And if we let her out of our sight as a family, there's this risk of her potentially being carried back into slavery. So there is just that constant. I got interrupted, and now I don't remember what I was saying. I think I was generally talking about the fact that the lived experiences of these girls are so significantly different from the original girls in Little Women that it really establishes and demonstrates to us how that affects every aspect of their decision making and their perception of the same experiences. And I just really like that and thought this was very worthwhile and powerful for that aspect. Kind of on the weaker end, I think I already mentioned it, I didn't feel the heart and connection that I have for Little Women. mainly because we don't get as introduced to the characters as that slow progression and attachment, I think. And this is quite short. The prose is really simple and straightforward, and it's YA, so I can totally understand that as well. And I have several other of Bethany C. Morrow's books that I do want to read, so I would love to see what she does with something of her own work, because this was a really good thought experiment, and I enjoyed the execution of it, definitely, other than the lack of connection that I had due to kind of the brevity of this book, I think. So that is So Many Beginnings. As far as what I'm reading this week, I have Wicked going on by Gregory Maguire. And I think that's the only thing I'm actually in progress with right now, which is great. I'm doing that on both print and audio and liking it very much so far. And I don't know what else I will be getting into, but definitely will be getting into more other stuff this week. As far as watching things this week, I don't think I've finished anything either, but I am, of course, doing Bridgerton. Bridgerton Season 3, Part 2 just came out, and I'm not through all of it yet. I did binge an awful lot, but so far I would say I'm really enjoying it. This season, if you've seen the trailers or anything, it hinges on a big secret. That's known going into this season. But that means, of course, miscommunication or lack of communication is a pretty major important element to this, and I hate miscommunication in romance. I want everybody to just communicate clearly and directly. Please, give me some romances with that. Unfortunately, they never want to. So other than that, it's not been overtly too terrible in terms of the miscommunication for me so far, but we will see. We will see how it pans out. So I'm sure I will have that finished up for you to discuss next week a little bit more. Life has been very busy, continues to be very busy. I feel like I say that every week. This week I would say, I'll give you an example. So this is going to be really, really boring. So skip over this. I've got the timestamps down below if you are bored. The 11th was a very long day for me. It was not as long as the previous week's work days, but I got up early because an adopter was coming to see Dusty, and he wound up being late, which is totally fine, not a big deal. But I had to get up to make sure I was like awake and alive for somebody to come over. And so the adopter was here, and then he was leaving, and someone showed up to tear out half of my entryway that I knew was happening, but I didn't know it was going to happen today, or not today, that day on the 11th. So that starts happening, and then I hear this banging on my door, and I think it's him coming to tell me something or needing something. And no, it's someone coming to give me a flyer and let me know that they're going to be tearing out and blocking the road in front of my house because the city's replacing the road. And I, again, knew that was happening sometime vaguely, but the flyer said it was happening on the 12th. So at this point, I was thinking that the 12th was several days away. I did not realize that it was the next day. So through all of this, most of this, I have been on a phone call because I was on a phone call for 7 hours straight during this day. So toward the end of that phone call, as I'm getting ready, preparing to hand things over to the other team in Asia, because I'm follow the sun. If you know what that means, you probably work a horrible corporate job as well. So I'm getting ready to hand things over, and I realize the date is the 11th. And I knew I had an event planned that I desperately wanted to go to that night. And so realized I was going to have to really rush to actually get everything wrapped up and handed over in time to be able to make it. And thought I was going to be late, and I wasn't. So I made it to go see Jennifer Ackerman talk, and she was absolutely wonderful, total delight. She was talking obviously about What an Owl Knows, one of her books I just recently read. She's a wonderful bird-specific nature writer, and just, it was a delight, absolute delight to see her talk live, and it's so very additive to the experience of having read the book. So it's just things like that all this week, and it has also gotten very, very hot. It's supposed to be 100 degrees tomorrow. That was definitely the worst day, where it was just nonstop, like couldn't get a break. And this whole like having the road in front of my house shut off, they busted my internet one day. And so I literally couldn't work from home and had to deal with waking up a few minutes before I was supposed to be going in for a meeting, basically, and not being able to make the meeting because I didn't have internet, and then having to rush to try and get ready and head to the office to make subsequent meetings, and having to arrange things with people over the phone instead of on my computer. Like, yeah, so it has been very inconvenient and very hectic this past week, and I think that's about it. Yeah, very hot. That's about all I can say. I think this coming week hopefully will be a big slowdown in the US. Some of us, many of us hopefully, now have a national holiday for Juneteenth, oddly in the middle of the week, because it's June 19th is the specific date. So that's falling in the middle of the week. But it feels weird to just have a random Wednesday off, right? So I'm very hopeful that will mean a real slowdown in my week, a nice day off for reading. That's what I'm going to take it for. And I'm hoping that it will cool off a little bit, because I hate this heat. And it feels very early in the summer for this. Normally our really the worst of summer is generally around the first week of July. And if we're already hitting 100 in the early part of June, that's an awful lot if it's going to continue on. So I'm not looking forward to that. All right. So I think that's all for recommendations. I'm going to kind of do something odd and talk about movies. Stick with me. I've been watching a lot of unusual for me YouTube videos, and so the algorithm has shifted and is trying to suggest me new stuff. About half of it is actually good recommendations. But I have seen a lot of movie trailers recommendations show up, and that has been interesting because I'm not normally on top of what movies are even coming out. And these are definitely not big blockbusters as far as I can tell. So these are upcoming movies that I'm really interested in, and I want you to be interested in, and I'm thinking are probably worth seeing in a theater for me. I don't go to the theater a ton anymore, but I love going to the theater. I like going in the morning on the weekend and just hunkering down in quiet, mostly empty theater. Yeah, it's great. So the first one is the one I'm most excited about, and it's upcoming in, I think, about a week. And that's Thelma. This movie looks like a riot. So if you've not heard about this, I want to absolutely buy the tickets and make this become a thing, because it's my jam. It's my jam. So this is giving me vibes of An Elderly Lady is Up to No Good, that book, which is very much about an old woman seeking revenge. But here, Thelma is not in the wrong. She's clearly in the right, because she's an old lady who has been scammed and realizes that the police, nobody is going to help her get her money back. And so she's on a journey of revenge to get her money back from this scammer and try to get things corrected herself. And it looks like a very fun comedy adventure, comedy of errors probably of some sort. But yeah, totally something I definitely want to see. The second one is called Bookworm, but that's a little misleading because it's not actually about books. It is about someone who is a bookworm and who's not very adventurous, it seems, who's a child. And this is a New Zealand film, and it's also starring Elijah Woods. And he's sort of the dad who's been out of this kid's life, who shows up, and they decide to go on an adventure in New Zealand, just kind of trekking New Zealand. It has very strong Hunt for the Wilder People vibes, which if you've seen that film, I love that film so much. So heartwarming and sad and beautiful and endearing. It's a great film if you've never seen Hunt for the Wilder People, but definitely has vibes of that and seems like a great movie. And then the last movie that I saw that I really want to get to does not have a date yet. Oh, so Bookworm is coming out early fall, I think. There are a couple different dates, but I think those are UK versus US, but generally fall time. This one does not have a date, the last one, and that is We Were Dangerous. Looks like a really fantastic kind of more drama with a little bit of comedy, but drama focused, I think, about these teenage girls in the 1950s who were sent to a reform school for delinquent girls in, I think, New Zealand as well, either Australia or New Zealand. And it's from Taika Waititi's production company, though it doesn't seem like he was involved. But this seems like just a really powerful historical film that's based on true stories. And having just read Rabbit Proof Fence, this sounds like it has a lot of echoes of that story. So I'm really curious to see this one. It looks beautifully made, and apparently, based on what I was reading up on it, it has already debuted at South by Southwest with really glowing responses to it there. So I think it's going to be definitely more in the indie film scope, but I really would like to see it. It looks great. So those are films that I'm looking forward to. I do also have one BookTube recommendation for you, and that fits into one of my favorite genres of BookTube video, which is book review plus cooking from the book. I love those type of videos. So this was from Bandy's Books, doing a review and recipe of gumbo from Yerba Buena. And just delightful video, as always. I really enjoy everything from Mandy's books. I don't know how she manages to present so coherently and so consistently. She does live wrap-ups and manages to get them clear and concise somehow, despite reading a massive amount of books. So I heartily recommend, if you've not checked out Mandy's books before, or if you have not seen this specific cooking plus book video, go check it out because it was great. So I think that's it for me today. I wish you a happy reading week, and thank you so very much for watching.